Donald Baldeosingh is an energy specialist and social entrepreneur. He is the founder of the technology-based Enman Group and the non-profit institution Carbon Zero Institute of Trinidad and Tobago. He established a Caribbean e-learning platform as a COVID-19 response. Mr. Baldeosingh also at one time served as chairman of Petrotrin, which is no longer with us, and he played an important role there. He has served for 10 years on the Industry Advisory Board of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. Mr. Baldeosingh has chaired conferences on such topics as engineering, procurement and construction, carbon trading, and infrastructure financing. He holds a BSc and MSc degrees in electrical engineering from the University of the West Indies, and he is an active and contributing citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. Donald, good morning. I hope I have done you justice. How are you? I have not seen you for the longest time.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very well, thank you.
Yes, and well, I'm glad to have you, and we'll talk a little bit about what you are doing. Perhaps we can begin by saying, you know, you are into renewables and sustainability and carbon sequestration and other things related to that. And we just had Brother Resistance there. We played Mother Earth. You want to say a word about him?
Yes, it's very sad, and for me, it's a great damper to have to hear that news just before coming on. Brother Resistance is one of the people who lived his belief and who influenced so many people with the work that he did. I think it reinforces the importance of carrying on and of empowering another generation to continue the good work that people like Brother Resistance have started. That's the legacy he has to leave, and that's the tribute we have to pay to him. I mean, just think about the profound words in that song, Mother Earth. It's amazing that we have had people like that among us, and that I feel that we have not fully utilized what they brought to us, but we still can do that even now.
No, we have a way of not appreciating our own, unfortunately, until they are gone. I always appreciated him. I had an interview with him on 97.5. It might have been about maybe 3 months ago. And we talked a little bit. On the next day, I think I had Mangal Patisar, who also is a significant contributor, because I was trying to show the importance of culture in development, you see. And this music and these words, people don't understand how vital they are. That Mother Earth song can find resonance in any society in which it is sung. It can find resonance in any society in which that video is shown. And it has a power, an immense power, because of the way we find ourselves in the world. You look at climate change, you see the fires in North America, in Canada, in California, in Russia. You see the devastation that is taking place in Brazil with the forests. And really it is something that can speak to anyone, anywhere. And he really was a powerful contributor and a powerful singer and a very unassuming, humble human being. Yes. I mean, he was an amazing fellow in that way. He was always understated and undersold himself, but it did not limit the power that he had, which was real, and the power came from, of course, creativity and talent, which, you know, is God's gift, you know. And I mean, it really is I mean, I have a personal sense of loss from him going. Anyway, we must we have to carry on, and we've got to have a discussion this morning. And tell me a little bit about what you're doing. Donald, before we get into the carbon zero situation, tell me a little bit about your involvement in a project involving Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago and its value and relevance at this time. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Thanks very much. So the project is called the Southern Caribbean Cable Project, and it involves interconnecting the markets of the Caribbean countries. You see, the premise is that the Caribbean needs to come off the use of oil and gas for its electricity and transportation needs. We are paying a big price in terms of the actual cost of oil for power generation in the region, and in terms of the carbon cost. So we have relatively high carbon footprints.
So you are making a case for clean energy in the region, and you are also making a case for smart transportation in the region. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the idea is that we can be self-sufficient in renewable energy in the Caribbean. And that is because we have huge sources of hydroelectric power in Guyana and Suriname, and geothermal energy in the islands. And in the middle of this is Trinidad and Tobago, which has remaining amounts of gas for power generation. So here's the definition of gas as a transition fuel. The idea is to build a power connection between Trinidad and Guyana as the first leg, and export gas-generated power, of which we have surplus capacity that we are paying. A figure was quoted as $28 million TT per month for having capacity that we are not using. So the idea is
that is unused electrical power that you are talking about.
Yes, it's electrical power generation capacity, because we have a lot more generation supply
than we actually need now.
Than we need, but we're paying for it. We're paying the capital cost of the TGU power plant, and we are paying the take-or-pay arrangements that exist. So, and here's Guyana that's growing, that's calling for more electricity, and that are paying 38 and 40 cents US per kilowatt hour. In Trinidad and Tobago, even unsubsidized, we can supply power to Guyana at half of what they're paying today using gas generation. And we can build an industrial zone now in Guyana, which we fondly call Point Lisa's 2.0, to take into consideration all the lessons learned at Point Lisa's. And then Guyana has an abundance of raw material available to be processed, where electricity is the main hamper to that progress. So now you will start.
So electricity supply and availability in Guyana is critical to their own industrial development. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
And the project that you are talking about fulfills this gap or this need by using extra electricity from Trinidad and Tobago in order to create a power grid in Guyana.
Absolutely, and to start the power interconnection in the region. Because once we build this extension cord from Trinidad to Guyana, the next thing is to develop the hydroelectric potential in Guyana. So Guyana has something like 7,000 megawatts of hydropower capability.
Yeah, they are water rich.
Exactly. So now you develop the hydropower in Guyana, supply that growing demand that has been created by having available electricity from Trinidad, and you bring power in the reverse direction back to Trinidad. So now we get a large injection of renewable energy into the grid in Trinidad. And now you continue this up the islands, one by one, bringing in geothermal energy into the system And you have now countries able to sell power and some able to buy power from this. Now you can develop wind and solar and add them to this power interconnection, which now becomes an integrated power system
Yeah.
throughout the
Now,
region.
Guyana has a lot of water because of the waterfall and the power of that, because of the waterfalls, I should say, and the power of that. But even small countries like Dominica are also water rich. And more than that, Dominica is a small player, and they're doing pretty well in terms of geothermal energy, and so is St. Lucia. So you're talking about the possibility of using existing gas-based electricity from Trinidad to create the conditions for power capacity in Guyana, which it does not now have, and then using the hydropower in Guyana for bringing clean energy and power to Trinidad and Tobago, and then connecting up the islands with other sources of clean energy like geothermal, and really creating a grid in the Caribbean that begins the transformation of the power matrix, the electrical power matrix in the region. Am I reading you correctly?
Absolutely. And then the other part is that in this interconnected system, the hydroelectric power in the dams in Guyana becomes the battery on the system. That's where the storage is. So if you're running solar power in the daytime, for example, you run hydro at night. Or if you have the geothermal connected up and some plant goes down, you draw from another source on the system.
Okay, now how far have you gotten with this? I mean, are you speaking to the government of Guyana on this? Have you spoken to the government of Trinidad and Tobago? Have you spoken, let's say, to TNTech here and to the other players in electricity? Because we have producers as well as distributors, a distributor company here. Are you in discussion or engagement on these issues now?
Well, so let me describe this. First of all, in March of this year, that made it 20 years since I first started this project. And over that time, we have engaged with different governments at different times. And sometimes the stars line up, and sometimes they tend to move apart. I think the stars are lining up again, and we are re-engaging with all the players. Over the time, we have had, for example, expressions of interest from Trinidad. We've had an MOU with Guyana. We've had agreements with NEC and so on in Trinidad. At this moment, we're bringing all of it back together because there's such a huge driver in terms of the need to transition energy that we feel now we have the impetus to move forward with the project.
Okay. All right. Well, I wish you luck on that. It is something that I would like to see happen in the sense that, I mean, what could be better for the Caribbean than to be one of the world's sustainable areas in terms of energy production and distribution. And I think that would be very valuable. And it would have, what can I say, impact in ways that we cannot even now anticipate. Certainly, I mean, it becomes a marketing tool for things like tourism. You know, Costa Rica for tourism, for instance, has basically taken advantage of the fact that it is heavy into sustainability and environmental protection, and those kinds of things have a way of becoming very important in the way you present and market yourself to the world. And the Caribbean is an area, is a high tourism zone, basically, and most of the countries in the region depend on tourism as their primary.
So I wanted to jump in to make a point on tourism.
Go ahead.
So when you pay your bill at a hotel in St. Lucia or in Barbados and so on, the thing that you're paying for most is electricity. maybe 75% of that bill that you're paying is your bought electricity,
Yes,
not services, not the scenery. You're paying for electricity. So imagine if we could bring the cost of power down to 25% of what it is today, what it can do for the tourism product in the region. And there's one other element I want to add, which is everywhere we run a power cable, we are going to run an accompanying fiber optic cable, because that cable gets almost a free ride on the project. So now you're boosting bandwidth and bringing down the cost of communication as well. So imagine now you have low-cost power and low-cost communication in these centers in the region, what it can do for the future.
Okay, it sounds promising. I wish you luck with it, and I hope your negotiations go well with the various parties. What about the other project that you are involved in now? You are involved in, what is the name of your NGO?
The NGO is called the Carbon Zero Institute of Trinidad and Tobago, CZITT, which is pronounced as seize as in grab it, the opportunity.
Explain to the listening and viewing public what carbon zero in concept means, so that people understand. A lot of times you hear these terms, but people don't know what they mean. They know it means something positive, but they're not quite sure. So explain what carbon zero means.
Thank you. Everyone is becoming more aware of climate change. And I think we're getting an appreciation that climate change is caused by global warming. Global warming is the result of increased levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Since the industrial age, mankind has been pumping CO2, carbon dioxide, at rates that the natural system cannot disintegrate and keep under control. So it's determined by scientists all over the world that the world needs to become carbon neutral by the year 2050 to avoid a catastrophic rise in temperature. Carbon neutral then means that we are in a state where all the carbon emissions that we put into the air are offset by carbon emissions that we remove from the air. And therefore we become in balance. To become carbon neutral means reducing as many of the sources of carbon emissions that we could. For example, how we drive, how we live, how we industry is set up. And then whatever remains in terms of carbon emissions, you offset it by carbon storage or planting of trees and so on that actually remove carbon from the atmosphere.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about Trinidad and Tobago? How do we fit into that picture? We are not doing so good, are we?
We are not doing well. We've had a long run, 120 years of producing oil and gas. But one of the unfortunate byproducts is the amount of carbon emissions we put into the air and what those products put into the air when they are used elsewhere. So it has taken us to a point where at one point we were the biggest producer of ammonia in the world. But for every ton of ammonia that we produce, we put 2.5 tons of carbon dioxide into the air. So that has made us, as a small country with a relatively small population, to the point it has taken us where per capita, we are sometimes the biggest producer of carbon emissions in the world, sometimes number 2 or 3. But the point is that we are a relatively large source per capita of carbon emissions.
Okay, so it is important for the population, the citizenry, to understand that we are in spite of the fact that we are a small country, in spite of the fact that we have 1.4 million people, so it's not just the size of the country, but the amount of the population, we are one of the world's highest per capita producers of carbon emissions in the world. And part of that has to do with our industrial base, and part of that has to do with the fact of the number of automobiles and vehicles that we have in the system. And in Trinidad and Tobago, you have literally close to 1 million vehicles on the road. You don't have them all at once, but that is a fact. And we have close to 800, over 800, certainly close to 900,000 vehicles on the road. Would you like to comment on that a little bit?
Well, every aspect of our life has become high carbon producing, and it's gotten that way over a long time. So because we've had low cost energy, it's actually fueled a lot of inefficiency everywhere. It's allowed people to have all of these cars, the foreign use cars that are coming in and so on. And sometimes people feel it's a marker of prosperity, how much traffic jam you have. But really, it's a statement of how inefficient a lot of things are running in the country. So vehicular transport is an important part of it. The use of electricity domestically in your homes and in commercial buildings and in industry is another part. And then industry itself, where it consumes gas and generates carbon emissions, is another huge part of this whole carbon picture in the country. All of it are really manageable, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's funny that you should talk about the amount of cars and wealth. The mayor of a city in Colombia once, which was committed to making that city a sustainable city, once made a statement which became, quite famous because of how much it captured. He said that development should not be measured by how many cars you have in your society, how many automobiles you have in your society, and how many automobiles are owned by the rich. Instead, development should be measured by how many of the rich and well-to-do are willing to use public transportation because it's clean and efficient, it's well-run, and they will not be basically polluting up the place with carbon emissions. So we move from that a little bit to talk about your NGO and what you are actually doing. Can you talk about that, please? What are you doing that is of value to society?
Very good. So it was in a response to the Paris Agreement in 2015 that I felt I had found my calling again. Going back to the year 2000, we actually had the Caribbean Center for Climate Change operating at Point-A-Pier at the refinery, where we had recognized that climate change was going to be one of the very important things we have to deal with for the future. And unfortunately, it was short-lived after that. And then in 2008, you mentioned that I had chaired a conference on carbon trading, and we looked at what the potential is for setting up a system in the Caribbean for trading of carbon emissions. Both of those initiatives were too far ahead of their time, as I very sadly found out in later years. But when we had the Paris Accord in 2015, and Trinidad and Tobago made commitments to reduce our carbon emissions, I felt that we had to tackle this from the nonprofit sector, from the NGO sector, where we could galvanize and mobilize hearts and minds, particularly of the young people, to get involved in creating a better world, the world that we are actually handing to them. So I took about a year formulating this whole idea of how to go about doing it and talking with stakeholders and so on. And then in early 2017, launched the Carbon Zero Initiative of Trinidad and Tobago at the time, and it graduated to the Carbon Zero Institute in 2020, just before the lockdown. The idea being to work with schools, sports clubs, businesses, governments, and other NGOs in projects and programs that would help to reduce our carbon emissions and also promote sustainability. And for Trinidad and Tobago, after spending more than 100 years of putting out carbon emissions, should become a model for reducing carbon emissions. I just think in terms of the economic possibilities. Every ton of carbon you remove from the atmosphere, it doesn't matter if you did that in Trinidad or in Australia or in Austria. The idea is that the globe, the world has benefited from a ton of carbon coming out. Yeah. And therefore, we have an opportunity for a huge trust as part of our diversification agenda to look into methods of reducing carbon, do the research, and come up with our own brand of carbon reduction. Okay. So we set about, sorry?
Go ahead. You go ahead. Finish your thought.
We set about engaging with people, and we realized that the place to do it is in the schools. And the reason is that these students, and we heard them just now, it was so fascinating hearing the CAPS students, where we've done a solar workshop with them already. They are passionate, they are informed, they want to be part of a solution. And what they really need is empowerment, guidance, and support to be able to make that happen. I could pause and then I'll come back to what we actually do.
All right. Okay. What I want to do now, I mean, we had a discussion about young people and youth this morning with Shivani Rambajan of the National Sixth Formers Association. And we saw the important work that she was doing there with the young people together with her other colleagues. I want to look a little bit now at what you are doing with young people in the high school system and make a connection with that. Because my own feeling is that the youth are raring to go. They have a more depth sensibility about the times in which they live. And of course, the future is theirs, and we suppress and we keep them down, and we do not facilitate their progress. So we will let's look at what you are doing and see what these students are doing and actually what they are internalizing. Could we have the clip, please, with the students?
As with every other round, we jump into the team question. Remember, guys, 20 seconds for 20 points. Let's go with it. What is the process by which CFCs harm the ozone layer?
Okay, so a CFC molecule to start with has both a CCl bond and a CC fluorine bond, CF bond. So the CF bond is stronger than the CCl bond, so the stability of the CCl bond will be smaller. So the chlorine molecule is actually able to detach from the CFC, causing the one oxygen molecule from the ozone to attach to it, forming a chlorine oxygen free radical, and in the process disintegrating ozone into oxygen, and all this happens in the presence of UV light.
Are you sure you're in secondary school, sir? My God, that is a great answer. Yes is the answer. Well done. Across to Abigail. Abigail, your first question. Which of the following statements is true? A. Climate change does not occur naturally. B. Climate change is a natural occurrence, but the rate at which it is currently occurring is unnatural. C, climate change is only caused by anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions? Or D, climate change can be avoided altogether?
B, climate change is a natural occurrence, but at the rate at which it is currently occurring is unnatural.
Yes, that is correct. Very well done. At Astor Boys College of San Fernando, similar scenario. You have a picture to look at. You got 20 seconds, and you have to state how it's related to climate change. Here is your picture. Let's go with it.
First of all, you're seeing what appears to be a large dump, which releases a large amount of methane into the atmosphere, which makes the greenhouse effect even worse. You're also seeing cattle eating in the dump, which leads to microplastics being ingested into the cattle, which could then be transferred into humans when humans eat the beef. You're also seeing cattle which also produce methane, and you're also seeing the improper disposal of waste, which can contaminate ground and surface water.
Fantastic answer indeed. Let's wait what the judges have to say. That is the correct answer. Well done.
Thank you very much, Donald, for making that clip available to us. We had 3 schools there, Naparima Boys, Astra Boys, and St. Augustine Girls High School. And I am sure that you did it with other schools as well. Could you tell us about what you are doing and what you are trying to do, and what is the mission of CZIT on this carbon zero objective?
The first school was Presentation College, Bonus. I don't want them calling me to tell me we didn't take note of their wonderful answer. Yeah. So first of all, we took an organized approach to this. In 2018, we took on 18 UWI students on their holidays, and we went to every one of the 150 odd secondary schools in the country, and we carried out a survey to understand what the schools are doing regarding climate change and the environment. How much is it in the curriculum? What extracurricular activities do you have? And so on. Then we carried out a baseline study among students to know how much they know about climate change. So I could tell you only 11% of secondary school students at the time knew that there was something called the Paris Agreement, and only 9% of them knew that Trinidad and Tobago was a signatory. So with all of that data, we put together these 5,000 or so questions that went into this climate quiz, and we've had 2 seasons of it. In that time, more than 150 schools actually took part in this quiz. It's conducted at the schools first. Sorry?
150 schools, you said?
Yes. We went to every one of them, and we carried out a preliminary round at the school where they selected the 20 best students, and we gave them 50 questions.
Enthusiasm to participate by teachers and students and so on. They lapped it up, right?
It's amazing. As you could see, they went into studying this, understanding it. We put it in really difficult ways for them to bring out the critical thinking by putting up pictures and so on. Yes. And they just exceeded all of our expectations. We ran the first season of it. We showed it on television, 8 one-hour episodes. And then we showed it in 24 Caribbean countries on Tempo Networks. And actually, they showed it twice because of the amount of interest in it. We conducted the second season just before the lockdown, and we're still waiting on a way to show it on television and get advertisers and so on. But it will come out soon because this material needs to be seen by the public, and the students who participated need to see themselves up in lights for what they've done. Now, right after that program you saw there was filmed, the schools went into lockdown. We were about to start a project with St. Francois Girls in Belmont to make them to become carbon neutral. On the very day that we were launching, the schools went into lockdown. Yes. So understanding that all these bright students with all their aspirations were now stranded at home, we started to create content for them in the area of environmental science. We took the syllabus, we broke it down into 25 topics, and we created a video of no more than 15 minutes on each topic, together with other resource material, to completely cover the subject. And as the lockdown continued, we kept producing more and more videos. We had 60 content developers, and we produced 500 videos in total.
So the learning did not stop. It continued during the lockdown, but
Yes.
you couldn't have the kind of participation and presence that you had before.
No. So we engage with them where they are, which is online. And we continue. And in fact, it meant that we had a much bigger reach, because now we've had more than 9,000 students who come through the platform, and they've accessed it more than 35,000 times. And this is from Belize and Jamaica in the north, all the way down to Guyana in the south. So everyone who is doing CAPE are tapping into the resources that we've made available and engaging on the climate change and environmental side as well.
Okay, I want to thank you for talking with me this morning. We're going to have to close up and break for the news shortly. But I must say that I found our discussion very interesting, enlightening, and inspirational, really. And more than that, you know, the program this morning was really built around the issue of sustainability, but also the rising consciousness of youth about sustainability. And I find that very, very inspirational. And I want to thank you for the work that you are doing, not only in the country, but throughout the Caribbean region. The significant impact that you are making on schools and the school-age population, and really what you are doing in terms of the evolution of consciousness on this issue of, what can I call, sustainability and sustainable development, the impact of climate change, and the need to basically reduce our carbon emissions on these islands in the Caribbean and throughout the Caribbean region, but also in the world. I thank you very much for being my guest this morning. Donald Baldeosingh. All the best to you. Thank you very much. And to you, listeners and viewers, I hope you enjoyed the program. I want to let you know that tomorrow we will have two guests as usual, but we have a special guest tomorrow in the person of the Honorable Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Keith Rowley, and he will be followed after we break for the news with a discussion with Professor Hamid Ghani of the University of the West Indies. So we have a very vibrant program tomorrow, and we ask you to tune in and to join us and to engage in the discussion. I can't tell you how much I have been affected and touched by the news of the passing of Brother Resistance. And as we close for the show, and before the news comes on, and the news will be read by Chanel Alsuran, I want to ask my team if they would play another round of Brother Resistance's Mother Earth as we move to the news with Chanel Alsuran.